Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of Ahsan Academy, let me welcome you to a presentation on the basal ganglion. In this presentation, I will try to define the basal ganglion, will describe the location and parts of the basal ganglion and functions of the basal ganglion, and finally I will try to correlate it clinically. You can see this is the section of the cerebrum. This is made transversely, and you can see the cerebral cortex outside, and deep to this is the white matter. In the white matter there is a group of nuclei here, so this is just under the cortex. That's why it is known as subcortical group mass of gray matter. When the gray matter, mass of gray matter lies within the white matter, it is known as nucleus. So it's actually group of three major nuclei. So it's known as a group of nuclei that is situated under the cortex in the cerebral hemisphere. On either hemisphere there are uh, basal ganglia. This is the cortex is removed, and you can see the basal ganglion here, and you can see the shape, 3D impression of the shape of the basal nucleus. If we take section transversely, this will look like this one, and this is the 3D view of basal ganglion, as well as this red one is the thalamus. So if we see the thalamus, this one is the thalamus. Actually thalamus is part of the diencephalon, so it is not part of the cerebral hemisphere. From inside the thalamus, this is the cerebral hemisphere, and including this one. So this one comprises of corpus striatum. This is the corpus striatum. This one you can see, this is the corpus striatum, and then it's continuous posteriorly, and this one is the amygdaloid nucleus, you can see, and claustrum is a sheet of gray matter is separated by white matter from other part of the basal ganglion. And you see the white matter separating the claustrum from here. Other part of the basal ganglion is external capsule, and inside this mass of the white matter is internal capsule. Already we got the idea that basal ganglion comprises of corpus striatum, amygdaloid nucleus, and claustrum. This corpus striatum comprises of caudate nucleus and lentiform nucleus. You can see this is the thalamus, already I have shown, and this is the corpus striatum that is making a mass, and it is continuous behind and moves a rounded course over the thalamus. You can see the section, this one is the part shown here. Amygdaloid nucleus is a bit posteriorly situated, deep inferior to this corpus striatum. This is previously I have shown, this is corona radiata. This contains the projection fibers running from the cortex to the spinal cord, and also from the lower part to the cortex. This passes through a narrow space. This is known as internal capsule. So you can see the internal capsule here. This is corona radiata narrows down, and this internal capsule separating the thalamus. This one is the thalamus from the group of nuclei. This is comprising of the basal nuclei. So you can see all the apparent and efferent fibers that runs through this narrow place is comprising of apparent and efferent fibers, and this is the internal capsule that actually separating the nucleus, basal ganglion, from the thalamus. This is the thalamus, you can see. This one bilaterally situated in the midline between the cerebral hemisphere. It is part of the diencephalon. This internal capsule is clinically very important because all the afferent and efferent fibers running to and from the cerebral cortex converge to this point. So these are the important fibers that is going to the spinal cord and responsible for motor activity and also carrying in major sensory impulses to the cerebral cortex. So this is the place where they combine together in a narrow place. So if this area is affected, that creates a widespread effect. This is the thalamus, you can see, and this is the internal capsule that separates the thalamus from these uh, parts of the basal ganglion. This is the compact bundle, you can see, and after the crossing this internal capsule, the fibers enters into the brain stem. Here you can see this is caudate nucleus, and caudate nucleus has this head, body and tail. This, if you take the section, this is like this one. So this one is the lentiform nucleus, and between lentiform nucleus and the caudate head, then body and tail, in between this internal capsules fibers runs. So this, some fibers are going up and some are going down. They separates this lentiform nucleus from the part of the different parts of the caudate nucleus and the thalamus. So this is looking like this one. You can see this is the lentiform nucleus and that are the caudate nucleus. You can see the tail, section of the tail here, section of the head here, and this is the lentiform nucleus remaining here. If you take section like this, you'll find this one, and this is the basal ganglion. So anatomically, this basal ganglion is very closely related to the lateral ventricles. So this is having head within the frontal lobe, then body passes through the parietal lobe to, and tail enters into the temporal lobe. So this one is the head, lentiform nucleus. This is head, this is body passing over, entering into the temporal lobe. So frontal lobe, then parietal lobe, then it enters into the temporal lobe. Lentiform nucleus is so named because it looks like lens, and it comprises of the putamen, which is outer part, and the globus pallidum is the inner part. It is relatively pale color, so it is so named, the globus pallidum. Neostem is another way of classifying the caudate nucleus and the putamen having similar structure. So these two together known as neostem. They are functionally very closely related and structurally also continuous. They contain the similar types of neuron and have similar connections with different parts. Globus pallidum is relatively pale color and remains inside the lentiform nucleus. Along with the gray matter of the diencephalon, this is playing an important role in control of the posture and voluntary movement of the body. This influences the skill cortical movement activity. So if it is disturbed, the skill function and converts into a raw movement, a coarse movement. Amygdaloid nucleus has some different functions. It is very related to the emotional change, body response to the environmental change, and it is influenced by the various factors that affects the human internal environments. Artery supply of this basal ganglion are important. You see, this one is the internal carotid artery, and internal carotid artery giving middle cerebral artery and anterior cerebral. This middle cerebral artery lies in the lateral sulcus, and remaining in the lateral sulcus, it gives small branches that enters into the brain substance through anteroperforated substance, and they are functionally end arteries, and these arteries are known as lenticulostriate arteries. So number of lenticulostriate artery enters into the brain substance and supply this basal ganglion. So though these are functional end arteries, but they are many in number. So if one artery is affected, then affection is to a limited extent. Limited area is affected. Dysfunction of uh, basal ganglia lead to two distinct forms of disorders. One is a hyperkinetic disorder, that means that excessive and abnormal movement is there. By term, they are known as chorea, athetosis, balism. Here I am showing the movement of the chorea. You look at this hand is showing involuntary, though these muscles are voluntary, but the person, this will not be under control of the person. Involuntary movement, and that meaningless abnormal movements will be there. Not only the finger, that may affect the total upper limb, or even may affect the lower limb and any part of the body. You can see the whole person is moving abnormally. You see, this person is sitting normally but showing the abnormal movement of the hands and foot. The second form is hypo, means relatively slowness of the movement. This hypokinetic disorder is slowness, and hyperkinesis is excessive abnormal movement. The most important example of hypokinesis is the Parkinson's disease. In these persons, they have a special type of walking pattern. If you ask the patient to walk forward, that person will take some time, will lean forward, and slowly will move forward. If you want say that person to stop and turn back, the person will stop and will take some time, then slowly will return, and again will come to the previous position in the same way, leaning forward. This spatial walking pattern is known as Parkinson's gait. They may have in sitting position, resting position, repeated movement of the hand. This is known as tremor. So all these are. Thank you very much for remaining with the